Welcome to training number 3, the policies for reuse communities. This training provides Upstream's current perspective in 2022 on the types of policies that local activists and organizers can champion in order to bring the new reuse economy to their communities. In this training, we provide some of the fundamental principles that guide our thinking about the solutions to plastic pollution and waste, as well as the circular economy, in order to equip you in evaluating policies yourself. We hope to share enough insight to enable you to either evaluate or develop policy provisions that are likely to create substantive change versus those that might be well-intentioned but not altogether effective. So here goes, training number 3. There is a paradigm shift that is taking place in how we think about policies and for waste. We will cover in this training the shift from a waste management approach to aiming upstream in the life cycle of products and using a waste prevention approach. We'll provide examples of policies that local communities and states can implement to ensure that reduce and reuse are prioritized in order to prevent waste from being created in the first place, so that there's less waste that needs to be managed. Now, using products for just a few minutes before they become waste is not a sustainable form of consumption for a planet of 7.8 billion people and growing. Disposable products harm the planet by every measure of environmental impact, from resource extraction to loss of biodiversity, to air and water pollution, to water consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, toxic chemicals consumption and release, as well as the harm associated with excessive waste. And the throwaway economy is a system where 15% of wood harvested, 22% of aluminum mined, 40% of plastic created, and 50% of glass produced goes primarily to making single-use packaging that's consumed often in a matter of minutes before it gets trashed, recycled, or littered. This system justifies the unnecessary extraction of precious natural resources on the front end, while creating significant amounts of waste and pollution impacts on the back end. This system treats the resources of the planet as disposable, and too often the impacts of disposability disproportionately burden people of color and low-income communities who live on the fence lines of the extraction, manufacturing, and disposal industries, extracting hydrocarbons, metals, and trees from the earth and turning them into throwaway packaging pollutes air, water, and habitat, with accompanying impacts on community fabric and long-term human health. The pollution from these systems is the alarming evidence that fence-line communities are being treated as disposable. And according to the Global Footprint Network, we are currently using up the resources of 1.7 Earths. And unless things change, we'll need 3 Earths by 2050. If everyone consumed renewable resources at the rate of the US, we would need 5 Earths to support the world's population. And in 2015, the World Watch Institute reported that the US was 5% of the world's population, but consumed 25% of the world's resources. While single-use packaging is used for all kinds of consumer products, we focus on transitioning the food service sector to reusable as the top priority for a variety of reasons. The first is that data shows that food and beverage packaging escapes the waste management system into the environment more than any other product type, while as an individual category, cigarette butts and smoking litter have always topped the charts of Coastal Cleanup Day data. Looking more closely, we see that grouped together, about 75% of the top littered items found during International Coastal Cleanup are food and beverage packaging. Meanwhile, other litter studies show that about 70% of the products littered on city streets that wash through storm drains and get blown around end up in nearby waterways. And 70% of these products are single-use food and beverage packaging. Looking at food service packaging overall, the numbers are astounding. Based on market research data, Upstream reported in the Reuse Wins report that the food service industry uses nearly 1 trillion pieces of disposable foodware each year and spends $24 billion in purchasing these items. These products generate 9 million tons of waste that local government and businesses spend $6 billion per year managing. Not only that, but about 20 billion food and beverage packaging related items escape waste management and become litter that local governments are spending over $11.5 billion annually to clean up. So the question is, how do we solve this problem? Many people think that banning plastic will solve the problem, because these days most people associate our throwaway culture with single-use plastics. And plastic is truly a significant crisis. 11 million metric tons of plastic enter the oceans each year, based on 2016. And this results in 150 million metric tons of plastic already being accumulated in the world's oceans. Plastic flows to the ocean are projected to triple by 2040 to reach 29 million metric tons. Without significant action, there'll be more plastic than fish in the ocean by weight by the year 2050. And people know plastic is bad. It's killing fish, whales, turtles, all kinds of marine life, even threatening human health, as we learn that we are eating a tremendous amount of plastic particles in our food and beverages, inhaling plastics, and recent science shows that plastics may be accumulating in the major organs of the human body. And so while banning plastic will help solve plastic pollution problems, the consequences of focusing on one material type and banning that is that the alternative single-use materials that will take its place have a host of environmental and health impacts themselves. And that means that we are really just shifting impacts, shifting to new impacts, and many of the same ones. Alternative single-use materials can be just as devastating and sometimes worse. These other single-use materials cause pollution, exacerbate climate change, extract precious and limited natural resources, propel loss of biodiversity, threaten human health. And in these ways, they are regrettable substitutes. And these regrettable substitutes demonstrate the fact that the problem isn't just single-use plastic, it's single-use itself. One problem is that the industries that create the waste in the first place by bringing us disposable packaging and products have spent decades promoting the idea that local government should do a better job of managing waste through recycling and other forms of diversion from landfill. But what we see from this chart is that recycling really isn't reaching very high levels because many of these materials are inherently not very recyclable, and that disposal and landfill and incineration are more often used. But none of these solutions can keep pace with the production, or at least the recycling will never keep pace with the production of single-use plastic. So recycling is challenging, and in many ways, the idea that packaging can be recycled or compostable are we generally find to be a form of mythology. Recyclable products are only better 56% of the time, according to extensive evaluation of the research by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. They looked at close to 2,000 studies and found that, in just a little bit more than half the time, recyclable is actually better for the environment. That's because the recovered materials going into the recycling system are usually downcycled or end up in landfill and incineration, like foodware, because it's really too contaminated to be recycled into new products. And compostable products are also a bit of a myth. Foodware is a contaminant that lowers the quality of compost. It adds no nutrient value, unlike food waste and yard waste. Packaging does not add any nutrient value to the compost. It's like it dilutes the compost quality, and also can have a lot of toxic chemicals in it that contaminate the compost. So commercial composters generally don't want food packaging, especially plastic compostables that take a long time to break down and have a higher amount of chemicals in them. Plastic compostables often get selected out of the compost facility or screened and sent to landfill, where they can have 30 times more greenhouse gas impact than composted food and organic waste. Most of the policies and programs aimed at solving the waste generation and plastic pollution problems have focused on the lower priority of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle, focusing on the recycling or landfill diversion. But if we continue to focus on this waste management approach, how to manage the waste once it's generated, increasing quantity of waste that needs to be managed. And as I've said, these waste management systems are not best suited for food and beverage packaging. They don't handle food and beverage packaging all that well. So as the 3 R's of solid waste tells us, we need to prioritize reduce and reuse. And this is what we call source reduction or waste prevention. So our prescription for policy is to prioritize source reduction or reduce and reuse, and do that as much as possible, and then find the best ways locally to manage the rest that isn't reduced. We believe that the 2 policy approaches for source reduction should be to reduce by eliminating all the unnecessary stuff. Things like single-use foodware accessories that we don't want or need with delivered takeout meals. And once we've reduced as much as possible, transition the rest to reuse and refill formats, and make reuse and refill the norm in our culture. We can use policy to do this. In 2021, Upstream launched a reuse policy playbook. We have a national one and one specifically for California. In this playbook, we guide readers through a series of policy approaches that follow the reduce first, then reuse the rest framework. The playbook offers a snapshot of existing policies at the time that it was written. There are many standalone policies in North America that are driving reduce and reuse for specific types of products. In our playbook, strategy number 1 is to reduce as much as possible. And there are a variety of policies that focus on banning single-use products. Many of these policies eliminate single-use, like bans on single-use hotel toiletry bottles that result in bulk dispensing, and others that drive towards a reuse option, like plastic bag bans that may be focused on plastic, but drive a switch to reusables, and banning single-use water bottles at government facilities and instead putting in refill stations. Another policy approach that focuses on reduction of single use is the accessories on request or skip the stuff policy. Upstream launched the Skip the Stuff campaign in 2020 in response to COVID-19 and the excessive amount of unwanted and unnecessary utensils, straws, condiment packets, and other accessories people are getting with the big increase in takeout food ordering. Today, 56 Skip the Stuff style policies have been enacted in local jurisdictions, and 2 states in the US, California and Washington, have enacted similar policies, meaning that 11% of the US population should no longer be getting accessories they don't want or need. The second set of policy strategies focusing on transition to reuse and refill. The second strategy is the transition to reuse and refill. At the state level in the US, we're calling on states to build targets for reduction and reuse into policies like bottle bills or bottle deposit programs, into extended producer responsibility or EPR packaging laws. Our suggested target is 50% reduction within 10 years. For food service, another policy that mandates drives reuse are the policies that mandate only reusable foodware be used for on-site dining. This is enacted already in a number of US cities, starting with Berkeley in 2019, where now McDonald's is having to serve customers with reusables. Foodware ordinances in the US also and in Vancouver and Victoria now require that disposable cups and sometimes containers no longer be given out for free. This is being called the latte levy in Europe, and it's starting to catch on. Finally, reuse at government events and workplaces and in government procurement policies is another option that we are starting to see. So in addition, there are some other strategies suggested in our policy playbook. As I said, an extended producer responsibility, where we hold producers accountable for taking back their products. Most often, these laws require that they take them back and recycle them. But this is a policy arena where we can also require that a percentage of the products that they put into the marketplace are reusable and refillable, and that fees collected from producers to operate these programs creates funding for the reuse and refill infrastructure. In strategy number 4, we talk about using a justice and equity lens in developing reuse and reduce policies. And this means bringing all stakeholders to the table and a variety of perspectives in developing a policy and determining how to make the policy work for all members and interest groups within a community. In strategy number 5, we talk about providing economic support and incentives for businesses. This means that the role for government can be not just policy making, but also grant making, providing technical assistance, and offering tax incentives to businesses that engage in reuse and reduce strategies. And in strategy number 6 of the policy playbook, we talk about disposables and how to ensure that those products that are still disposable after we have done reduce and reuse actually get composted or recycled. And that means that the requirements for local policies have to be not just that these products be theoretically recyclable or compostable, but they have to actually be capable of being recycled or composted in the local system. And we also add recommendations for disposable foodware about the priority classes of chemicals in foodware and the certain kinds of plastics used for foodware that shouldn't be allowed if we're going to adequately protect public health. And the same goes for the reusables that we choose. And in strategy number 7, we talk about the specific kinds of plastics for reusables and other materials in metal and other reusable products, how to ensure that the reusables are non-toxic. So through our community coalitions and network partners across the country, versions of Upstream's model ordinances have been enacted, even during COVID. This includes both the dine-in policy, the Skip the Stuff campaign, and some of the events, reuse and events policies. As of January 2022, over almost 62 million people, or 19% of the US population, lives in a jurisdiction where reuse policy is in force. And we hope that you will help us grow that number. If you want to learn more about bringing reuse to your community, check out these resources on our website, including the reports and the other training presentations in this roadmap to reuse, our Indisposable podcast, our vlog and blog series, and the Indisposable Live podcast. We hope that these resources and the more specific policy resources available on the roadmap to reuse will help you in your journey to make your community reusable. So if you're inspired and you want to learn more, there's all kinds of ways to do so. At Upstream, we support those who want to start local reuse coalitions, and we host national conversations, including with our friends in Canada, conversations with NGOs and businesses in the National Reuse Network, and with government folks in the Government Reuse Forum. I highly encourage you to sign up for our weekly email newsletter and the Indisposable podcast, and to join our networks, coalitions, and forums, so you can keep track of the exciting ways and be involved in helping the new reuse economy to unfold. Thank you so much. Hope that this training is useful to you, and we encourage you to check out the other trainings in the roadmap to reuse on our website. Thank you.